Alrighty, let's try this one more time. So this is my ED304 concept map diagram of all the terms that we've gone over. I only have 15 minutes. I'm going to try to get through as many of them as I can. So I'll start with the big ideas that I had. First of all, I went and divided up all these terms into each of the domains that we covered. First of which is the psychomotor domain, which is physical movement, things to do with the way that our body works physically. After that, we have the affective domain, which is just emotions and experiences, and then I have the cognitive domain, which is literally thinking and skills, and I have teaching and the implications of these different things the implications for teachers, with the different types of learning and stuff like that. So we'll go ahead and go back to we'll start with the psychomotor domain aspect of this diagram. So first of all. So the psychomotor domain, there's a lot of different parts that kind of go along with it. I'd like to mainly focus on sort of the frontal and the motor cortex. So the motor cortex itself is a narrow band across the top of the brain. It goes from ear to ear, and it processes voluntary movement. So it's the movement that we physically and mentally make. The frontal cortex actually has to do with, it's the very top of the brain. Kind of underneath your forehead. If you were to touch your forehead, you'd be touching your frontal cortex. That's where all of your thinking happens. Going on to memory. So memory is just the process of us. Excuse me. It's the process of what we think and what we store. Memory is it's just a storage unit where we keep all of our stuff. It's where we keep all the information that we learn on a daily basis. And our memory is built up based on the things that we learn, and it has to do with our neural efficiency and our plasticity. So plasticity is the ability of the brain to change over time. It's the ability with which we have the ability we have to change. To learn new things. There we go. Neural efficiency. Neural efficiency is how well our neurons work, and seeing if you can use fewer neurons to do the same thing than you would otherwise. So so we also have different types of memory. We have the emotional memory, which is just memory based on emotions, and this tends to be the most effective use the most effective storage, especially in young people. I know that from my experience as a student, I remember most of the things that I remember emotionally in school, and so if I was emotionally attached, then it was more emotional for me. It was something that I remembered even better than I would otherwise. The next we have is declarative memory, which is just knowledge of events and facts, and so it's how we remembered things based on fact. The corpus callosum is actually in the wrong place. The corpus callosum is it's the small bridge between both hemispheres of our brain, and that's where information communicates across that little bridge a lot. The working memory, it's also the short-term memory. It's the small period of time in which we keep information, and so we don't have working memory is way different than say the long-term memory. It's the opposite, in fact, where the working memory is kind of where we go through the information that we receive in one day or in one experience or something like that, and it's kind of like a clipboard of information, and from that clipboard it kind of is sorted later into memory that is garbage and memory that we keep forever. So the sensory memory is information that we process from our immediate environment, and we actually keep this information only for a limited time, so it's kind of like the working memory in that we don't keep it forever. Another little branch I have right there is the primacy recency effect, and that's just the phenomena that we tend to remember the things that we experienced or that we learned most recently. So applying to teachers directly, it's actually more important than that it's more effective, I guess, if we're looking for higher test scores. It's more effective if we test our students on the things that they learned most recently. So, alrighty. So after that, we have the affective domain, and that is, like I said before, it's just the emotions and experiences. On the physical aspect, we have the limbic system, And the limbic system they're the structures at the base of the cerebrum, and so they're kind of, if you were to touch the back of your neck, kind of where it goes to your head, that's kind of where your limbic system is. And these regulate emotions. And so the different parts, I'm not going to go through all of them, but they're the hippocampus, the amygdala, the hypothalamus, and the thalamus, and they're just the different parts of the limbic system, and they all have different roles. The amygdala specifically encodes the emotional messages into long-term storage. So there's that. My next little branch here is gender, and gender is just male versus female. And ADHD, the next little branch, is it's a learning disorder based on how, I'm not sure exactly. It's a learning disorder that a lot of kids have. I think it's overdiagnosed, although the children who tend to have ADHD or that haven't ADHD tend to be a little more hyperactive. It's specifically called attention deficit hyperactive disorder, where they cannot pay attention and they cannot stop moving, basically. And so teachers have a hard time with this because they think that just because a kid, and this apply, I have this under gender, because the ADHD is actually, it's more prevalent in male students than it is in females. And part of that problem, I think, is that the males actually have a harder time learning when they're farther back in the classroom and when they have a really quiet teacher. And so as the teachers, we can apply this directly to our own classrooms, where if we see male students or female students too, it could go either way, although it does apply more to men or to boys. If we see a student who's struggling and they're sitting in the back of the class, it might be better to move them forward and to talk to them a little bit more directly or a little bit louder or something like that, because it will help them pay attention and it will engage them. So, alrighty. My next little branch here, I have adolescence and puberty. So adolescence is just the period of time in a person's life that's between childhood and adulthood. Adolescence is kind of that weird phase of life where their body's changing and they're becoming an adult. And puberty is just kind of the name of that process, and it's just where they start developing both mentally, physically, and emotionally to become becoming an adult. I have a little further down, I have hormones. Hormones play a huge role in puberty. They're just chemical processes that happen during puberty that change bodies. So during this period of time, this puberty with all these hormones, there are a lot of body composition changes specifically that can lead to eating disorders. And so the hormones that, for females actually, and males as well, but for females this applies more, their bodies change a little bit, and it leads to eating disorders because females specifically, they actually gain more body fat. And so they have these eating disorders where they're starving themselves, or they're binging and they're purging because they don't feel like they should. They don't feel like they fit in because their body is different. And that's also body dissatisfaction, where they're just not satisfied with their body. And so anyway, so coming along with the eating disorders, we have adolescent risk-taking, and I put this under there because eating disorders are considered risk-taking, but it also covers just doing bad things. It's risk-taking, so like drug and alcohol use, just doing crazier things. I know I had some friends who in high school who they started car surfing, and one of them actually was very seriously injured. Some of them, they swore it was so much fun. Things like that, where as an adult you would look back and say, wow, that was definitely not something that I should have been doing. And so that kind of leads into adolescent mortality, where adolescent mortality is actually a little bit higher than other mortality. Or adolescence, because of this risk-taking, the mortality is actually a little bit higher and during adolescence than it is in other times. So, so also we have anxiety. That's also caused by, or it can be caused by these hormones and this weird time in an adolescent's life. So this anxiety is just nerves. There are a lot of anxiety disorders that affect the way that they perceive their world and the way they interact with their world. And so there are different types of anxiety. There's facilitating anxiety, which is anxiety that that motivates them, and there's debilitating anxiety, which actually inhibits their learning and inhibits their the way that they work. They cannot function because they are just so nervous. And so we need to be aware of that as teachers. And cognitive dissonance, then, which was also in the anxiety portion of the class, cognitive dissonance is being able to have two ideas in your brain at the same time that are actually opposite things. And so having two different ideas that kind of they don't match, they don't coincide very well. And that can cause anxiety as well when these kids they're coming into these classrooms and they're learning things that they didn't quite understand before. They're learning new things that are challenging the things that they once knew, and so things are changing and it's causing some anxiety. So, alrighty, so moving on to the next branch, we have the cognitive domain, which we talked about is the part of the brain, or the part of the class where we talked about the development of knowledge and thinking. So this is specifically where they are thinking and they are changing. On my last little part under affective domain, in puberty, I have the changes in cognition, which is the part where these kids they're just learning new things. They're becoming different. Their way of thinking is changing. And so back under cognitive domain, we have the cognitive belief system, and that specifically is just the way that they think. It's the unique construct that one uses to interpret how the world works, and it's based on the things that they experience. And so under these changes in cognition, we have Perry's theory of the cognitive development. And that was just a guy who came up with these theories and these different steps of thinking. And he has many other smaller subcategories. But for the purposes of this assignment, for the purposes of this class, we just went through 4. So we have the duality stage, where everything is seen in black and white. Everything has a right or a wrong answer, and that's it. The next one is the multiplicity stage, where everything is seen as opinion, and this is actually where a lot of that anxiety can come in. This is kind of where adolescents are. I think on average, this is where adolescents think. It's this multiplicity stage where the things their parents or their teachers are telling them are seen as opinion rather than fact. So yeah, the next stage is the contextual relativity, where everything is relative, and they're kind of thinking and trying to figure out where they stand. And then the next stage would be the commitment to relativism, where they are making decisions based on what they think is morally right, in the context of what they think. And so they're making their own decisions, they're standing up for what they believe, and they're just being more individual. So yeah. Let's skip down to the degree and context of original learning. So as teachers, we're going to deal a lot with kids who are going to come in and they're going to have these certain things that they've learned, and we have to build on that. And that actually kind of goes into the cognitivism, where they take the things that they're learning now, and this is actually under the next branch. It's the cognitivism, where they learn from their environment, they learn from their different things. And they're building on it, kind of like building blocks. That's how I think of that. Sorry, not cognitivism, constructivism. I was wrong on that. Constructivism is where they're taking these building blocks and they're just kind of building on previous knowledge. So anyway, the degree and context of original learning is really, really important. And it kind of goes hand in hand with the transfer of learning, and the transfer of learning is just how the things that they've learned previously affect the things that they learn now. And there's positive and there's negative transfer, and positive transfer actually helps in new learning. Negative transfer inhibits new learning, and it's kind of hard. I definitely wanted to talk about the dual coding theory. I think this is really important in teaching. So we have to engage we can engage their sensory memory, their emotional memory and stuff like that, and that's the way that we get them to learn, and how we make them or help them learn new things. Running over to the rest of these isms, we have connectivism, constructivism, and cognitivism and behaviorism. So we've got cognitivism, which is observing and relating it to prior knowledge. We've got behaviorism, which is so a stimulus and a response.